Let's move to this story. A rush to the pub before the second national lockdown may have fueled the record rise in COVID-19 cases that followed, according to experts. It comes as the UK announces another 33,000 positive cases on Thursday, 39% more than the same time last week. The figure marks the highest in the country since the coronavirus outbreak hit, and comes a week after the second lockdown begins. Scientists from Imperial College London believe the sudden spike could have been caused by people rushing to socialise before the strict measures came into force. Professor Hugh Pennington is Emeritus Microbiologist at the University of Aberdeen. Hugh, always good to speak with you. Can I just take a punt at what I think is going on here and throw it to you, if you don't mind, to begin with? We have 33,000 more positive cases yesterday because we're testing more people, true or false?
True up to a point. Yeah, we're testing more people, so we're finding more cases. But that's probably not the reason why we've seen this spike, because we're testing much the same number of people this week as last week and the week before. If we'd suddenly doubled the number of people we were testing, we would obviously have, well, it'd be reasonable to guess that if we saw an increase in cases, a lot of that would be down to that. But let's assume we were testing roughly about the same number of people. Very hard to tell. And the logic behind the increase in cases, in the last day or two, happening, a few days after the lockdown was announced, but before the lockdown was imposed, is very, 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 very real, in the sense that there's this 5-day incubation period between being exposed to infection and falling ill, and another day or two perhaps before you get a test. So, it fits the figures, it fits the virus behavior pattern very well, and we know that people are jumping up down in pubs. Well, that's quite a good way of getting infection. If so long as there's somebody else there who's infected, and of course there might well be, because a lot of the infections, particularly in the younger folk, are asymptomatic. You don't know you're infected, but you're still infectious.
Yeah. Does it matter if we get, there is a pandemic on. We know that some people are going to get it. We know that it's perhaps even helpful if people do get it and it goes through them and, they isolate and doesn't spread, etc. That's one less person, or one person ticked, if you like, that's not going to get it again. Well, there's theories on that, but you take my point. It is a pandemic. People are going to get coronavirus. We can't stop that.
Yeah. Lots of people have, and no doubt a lot more will. And let's hope that they're in the younger age groups, because they're the people that, generally speaking, have a relatively straightforward time, probably not ill enough to see a doctor, never mind get into hospital. The trouble is there's a spillage of virus from those people into older people, the over 60s, who are much more likely to get into hospital, and some of them, unfortunately, into intensive care and all that kind of thing. The story we know about. And even care homes, we're still not protecting care homes to the point where I'd like to see. We're still having outbreaks in care homes, where, of course, which are full of people who are very vulnerable just because of their age, never mind anything else they might have wrong. And of course, the older you are, you're more likely to have these other conditions that predispose you to have a very hard time with the virus. The problem really is stopping the spread of the virus from the younger folk who don't really have a serious illness into the older population. And that can be quite difficult, because we know that the best place to catch the virus, the worst place, I suppose you might say, is in the home.
Yeah.
Right since January, we've known that the place which the virus really loves, in the sense of getting around, is in the home, for obvious reasons.
So why do you think a lot of people now talked about this rush to the pub? Because previously, certainly the headlines I was reading here were that it wasn't the hospitality sector that was largely responsible. It was, as you've just identified, mostly in the home.
Well, yes, but we know from basically experience, not just in the UK, but in other countries, that pubs are good places in the sense of transmission, because particularly if you're not socially distancing, particularly if you had a bit to drink, you get a little bit merry, and there's a bit of heavy breathing going on, and those are ideal circumstances for the transmission of the virus. It's not going to happen every time you go to the pub, because it really does depend on having somebody else in there who's blowing out the virus. And of course, most of them won't know that, because they're not ill enough to, well, they're well enough to go to the pub, but they may well be infectious. And this is the tricky thing about this particular virus, is that people can be transmitting the infection without having any symptoms. And also, even when they get symptoms, they're still very infectious the day before the symptoms appear. And that makes it very difficult to control. It's not like other viruses where you, like SARS, where you weren't infectious until you got a fever, until you had symptoms. And so it was very easy just to check people's temperatures. Sure. If they had a temperature, okay, it was a no-no going to a pub or going on an aeroplane or whatever it was. This virus, not as simple as that, unfortunately, and that's why it's proving so difficult to pin the virus down and get rid of it. And unfortunately, that's the reason why we have to have these lockdowns.
Yeah. What I was going to say on that point, Hugh. What is your gut feeling on what might happen on December the 2nd?
Well, I don't like making predictions, but we're not getting the case numbers down as quickly as anybody would like. The lockdown will get the case numbers down, but we'll just have to wait and see. Unfortunately, we're in the hands. I keep on saying we're in the hands of the virus, and the vaccine ain't going to be around before then, and it may not be rolled out on any scale until well into next year anyway, because it still has to pass various safety tests. The first sort of release of info was not the detailed information that the regulators need and all that kind of thing. Okay, there's a vaccine coming, there'll be other vaccines coming, and that will help enormously. But that's for next year, not for this year. So Christmas, be prepared to stay at home. I think is sound advice. Let's hope we don't have to, but that's my fear. And the way the virus numbers, they go up and then they go down, then they go up again. We're still not really hammering the virus enough to say everything will be fine by mid-December.
Professor Hugh Pennington, as ever, thank you. Emeritus microbiologist, University of Aberdeen, with us here on Talk Radio. I think there will be carnage if the lockdown doesn't end on December the 2nd, right? This is going to be horrendous. It comes back slightly to Dominic Cummings, who was chief advisor, the man in the ear of the Prime Minister right at the beginning, when, as we now know, there was an opportunity in the first lockdown, which most of us thought, okay, well, let's run with this and see what happens. It seems like, every other country is doing this and we're told this is the way. We didn't have any ways of measure. There were no yardsticks. There was no precedent for this. So, okay, we'll go with it. It's not good. It's going to be tough, but we'll run with it and see what happens. And we now know that could have happened a couple of weeks sooner. Even 1 week sooner would have been fine. But hey, guess who was shouting in the ear of the Prime Minister at the time? Oh, it was only Dominic Cummings yet again. His paw prints are all over that decision. I promise you. If that's not enough for you to think maybe this isn't the guy with the best sound advice. 0344 499 1000. We know there was a point, by the way, when the scientists said, actually, and it goes into care homes and all sorts of other areas, when the scientists said, don't lock down, don't lock down, don't lock down. Then there was a point they said, lockdown, lockdown, lockdown. And that was the lull in all of this. Jim in Somerset says, my peers and I are worried that Brexit is going to be watered down if Cummings is going. We mustn't free from any Brussels oversight whatsoever. Fair point there from Jim. Somebody here says, I do not defend Mr. Cummings. I avoid identity politics. I defend a heretic like me, someone who challenges the accepted order. I know haters will not comprehend the difference. It's a side effect of indoctrination into the woke culture, says Tribal. Isn't that the guy that tweeted right at the beginning of the programme, talking about, I think it is. What I don't understand about that, how would you ever form an opinion on anybody? Or are you only allowed to say that, if I have a belief that I think Dominic Cummings, and the last time I looked, there's nothing particularly controversial about a bloke on the radio who thinks a particular government advisor wasn't very good. That's all we're talking about here, by the way. That's my view. Others have different views. So I think it's good that he's gone, and I want somebody better in the role. I want somebody who's going to deal with the carnage that we've just been talking about with Hugh Pennington. Someone who's going to be able to say to the Prime Minister, this is the way you've now got to deal with this, because it's been rubbish up to now. So if you follow the idea that, from that last tweet and others, that it's, what was it he said? It was preaching hatred because you want to call to account a senior government advisor. I honestly don't know what options that leaves you, other than somebody sending you a list saying, these are the people I'm okay for you to have a pop at, and these are the people I'm not okay for you to have a pop at. I don't know why identity politics comes into it, because you get me started on that. And anyone who listens to this show regularly will know that if you want to talk about infectious diseases, identity politics and all that goes with it is right up there, frankly. One of the most destructive elements of political discourse and the world we've currently found ourselves in.